What is up, friends, fellow anti-netters, shiparians, and all-around badasses that like to grow and sharpen their mind? And feel free to substitute badasses for your own version of someone who likes to grow, sharpen the mind, learn every single day, and, well, essentially get better. Anyway, I wanted to kind of kick off the dust. I took off this previous Friday, and I read there's this book, and I don't know why. So, every year and a half or so, I'll just pick up an 800-page book, like something insane, like Don Quixote, or a massive biography, Hamilton, or something like that. And I will sit with it and go through it for several months, and it'll be my kind of pleasure reading, night reading material. And I just finished an 800-page book on Napoleon. It's called Napoleon: A Life by Andrew Roberts. And one of the things in it, it's funny, is because with reading these types of books, I don't really have an agenda, other than to just sit with it, go through it, and it's kind of a nice breakup of a sequence when you're essentially, reading books with a bib card, and you have an objective, and you're, trying to find nuggets that you can then apply and share with others. Like, that's a different type of reading. And I talk about this. I ran a program called the Neo-Intellectual Institute for a while, which is going to resurface in some shape or form at some point. And one of the primary elements that I talk about and it's one of the first things that we actually dive into, is selecting the different types of reading. And there's one with like an objective focus, a reading where you're actually focusing on exploiting the content and taking it and applying it and creating your own framework and teaching it to others. And then, so that's one type of book. And, the word exploiting is probably going to need to be massaged at some point, but it deals with the whole paradigm that Bezos talks about of exploiting mindset, exploiting companies, where you kind of exploit opportunities, and explore companies, where you explore opportunities and you pursue opportunities with a state of wonder, right? Now, so that's kind of the thing that I talk about and teach in the Neo-Intellectual Institute, is that of finding some very relevant books for your research, for what you want to create, what you want to write about, what you want to essentially talk about and teach others. And that's kind of the exploit type of books, right? Very narrow focused, very applicable to what you're doing. Then there's the explorer types of books, where you are reading and with some kind of, it has books and material that have some type of relation and relevance to your area. For instance, when I was researching and writing the book, the Anti-Net Zettelkasten book, there were several books that I read, like the exploit type of books and material that I read were, number one, here, I'm going to jump back. So this is the exploit type of books, okay? So number one, it would be like Niklas Luhmann's books. Number two, there would be books research articles by Johannes Schmidt, who, surveyed and took a deep dive into Luhmann's notebooks, right? Those are the exploitive types of source materials, where I'm going to read that in explicit detail and figure out the ways in which I will be, diving into each one and leveraging it for my own book, okay? So pretty simple. The explorer type of books, the ones that I want to explore were books like the Book of Trees, which is essentially looks at the tree structures of information over history. And that's kind of it's an area that is loosely relevant to my research, and it became a big part of my research. But I was essentially exploring and seeing, what I could glean from that book. Now, there is a third type of book. So now you know the difference between exploit books, explorer books. Okay, now there's a third type of book, and that is the pleasure reading books. That is the ones that you read and you have zero intention of essentially gleaning anything of value from it. And these are interesting types of books, and I think great things to do, and these types of books to pick up and read, right? And balance is key with all of this, of course. That's the disclaimer. So you kind of want to constantly rotate between all three types of books. And so the pleasure reading, the no agenda, like no intention of gleaning any nuggets, is, for example, reading, 800-page biographies like the one I just read on Napoleon. And the way I came upon reading this book was, I have a ton of books, as you've seen maybe from my videos. And I started, just kind of exploring in that aspect and reading through a bunch of them. And for some reason, just the writing, and it wasn't necessarily like I was curious about the history of Napoleon and when he even came into power and why he had, why there's a lot of memes about him, right? Like, oh, you have a Napoleon complex, where you're like power hungry but short, right? Like, I wasn't really curious about that aspect. I was more curious about when did he come into power? How did he even come into power? Like, we had the whole French Revolution where Louis XVI had his head hacked off, and then somehow, some way, a complete emperor, a dictator, gets into power by the name of Napoleon. And I was like, okay, I'm kind of curious about that. So that intrigued me. But what really intrigued me about the book, and the reason I bought it, I believe, probably like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, was the reviews. It just had a ton of amazing reviews. I think it was like one of the best New York Times bestsellers. And I looked at it, and I think Elon Musk at the time was talking about it, and he was reading a Napoleon biography. And so I picked it up several years ago. Now, I've picked up a lot of books. That doesn't necessarily mean I'll ever even read them. But what gripped me about reading and picking up this Napoleon book was the writing. It was just such fantastic writing, prose. It did not feel as if you were, reading a boring history book. It was written in such a entertaining and gripping way. And what's interesting is I have finished the book, and I've probably taken maybe like 4 or 5 bib notes in the whole thing. But those bib notes are, nuggets that probably will resurface, especially if you're privy and you're reading the Scott Scheper letter. It may resurface itself pretty soon here. And I wanted to share that because, so often maybe you feel pressured when you're picking up a book that you want to take a ton of bib notes and you want to have a lot of output out of the book. And my thesis is that you really should have kind of 3 types of categories of books and feel fine about rotating between all of them. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. And, there's some really good nuggets and concepts that are going to come from this book. And some may surface, in the near-term future, you'll see. And some may, surface and be used 2 years from now. But that is the benefit of, having a whole workflow, having a whole system, and understanding the whole, Antinet Zettelkasten workflow. It's like once you develop the whole concept of bib cards and then transforming those into main cards, or even just go straight for bib cards, letting them, percolate and for a long time and ruminate in the Antinet, and, be able to refine them through XREFs, creating external references that are very quick to create. And you know what I'm talking about if you've read the book. It just unlocks this whole new world of the way in which you can digest knowledge and then turn it into valuable pieces of wisdom and lessons for others when you shift to the contribution mindset. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this little brief thought, and I want you to always remember to stay crispy, my friend. Peace.